My name is James Lake and I am a cardboard artist. I would describe my work as a cardboard sculpture in its purest sense. I've been working with cardboard probably about 20 to 25 years. I very much like taking recycled materials and building them into significant pieces of art that people will hopefully be touched by in an emotional way. So getting down to the nitty-gritty of the sculpting process. So we start with kind of a flat kind of design or a shape. And then that shape is then turned into a mass by adding extra pieces of card. One of the beauties of kind of working with card in small pieces is I can actually take something that will become part of a larger sculpture and I can actually hold it in my hands so you can actually see the different angles that you need to kind of work on. Once I've got these kind of angles, that gives me a sense of the overall shape and proportion. I then start using pieces of card that could become cladding, as it were, like you'd get on the outside of a house. In the human body, you don't get right angles. So essentially what I'm doing is working out ways to kind of curve and kind of bend the card or press the corrugations together to actually mould round the form. And then once I've got an overall kind of shape, then I actually return to the surface details. Now say for instance, all the features like the eyes, nose and mouth all kind of have this kind of curved aspect to them. So you are kind of thinking about what is the right shape from the front. So it might be a drawn nose or a mouth. And then you're kind of thinking about, well, actually what happens when you curve that card? Does the shape kind of get smaller? I find kind of with the figurative sculpture that what finishes the work is actually the hair. Now, when you think about hair and you think, well, actually, how would you replicate that in cardboard? Essentially, you have to think about each area of hair as its own separate kind of entity or section. It's a bit like a very complicated jigsaw, as it were, and I don't always know quite where it's going to go. Okay, so this sculpture is going to be called Youth. It's about 2-3 weeks old, so it's kind of fairly new in its conception. This sculpture was quite a complex and tricky thing to do because it's actually in the process of jumping. The work is off the floor, I think by about 15 to 20 centimetres. It's held in place by a steel bar that kind of runs through the downward leg, so it needs to be fairly lightweight. With that in mind, what I've done is I've used a variety of lightweight cardboard. So I've kind of been using some of this cardboard. It's a honeycomb cardboard and it has kind of a strength to it, but you can also press the work and kind of mould it and kind of push into position. So I've kind of done that in a number of different places around the work. The different types of cardboard that I use in my work are first, I use single corrugated card. Now this is kind of the type of card that you get in most kind of packaging that you'll get delivered through your door, and it's kind of very easy to bend and curve. Now this card is just like a corrugated roll. It sometimes comes in packaging inside the kind of boxes, but you can also buy it from different suppliers, or they kind of use it a lot in schools. It's good for quick kind of covers in between kind of structures. This is a slightly more specialist kind of cardboard, but I actually get this from a recycling community resource centre here in Exeter. It has this really nice corrugated filling, which is great for strength and it's incredibly lightweight, but it also functions well inside kind of an armature. Another type of cardboard that I use is this double corrugated card. Now this is great in terms of it's kind of more load bearing, so you can actually put weight and pressure on this, and this is really good for kind of building legs and arms, and if you have a sculpture that's kind of standing and you want it to be strong and upright and not to kind of move too much. And finally, this card comes in the packaging that you might find in the supermarket for soft drinks and things like that, so it's really good. It's actually really good to kind of paint on. And that's kind of about it with regards to the materials that I use. Now, apart from the honeycomb cardboard, I've been mostly using a single corrugated card because that's kind of quite lightweight. And you can see the masking tape as well, where I've kind of held it together. Okay, so nothing in this sculpture is kind of set in stone by any means, but what I'll do is I'll kind of think about ways that I could start putting in the structure and the detail and the pattern from kind of pieces of card like this. So I've got a very strong kind of pair of scissors. That's really, really important. Now, these scissors are kitchen scissors. I think they're normally used for cutting things like meat or things like that. So when it comes to cutting single corrugated card, scissors work fine. The tools of my trade are very, very simple and kind of pared down. I use cardboard, masking tape, hot melt glue gun, I use scissors, I use a craft knife. I very much like the idea that when you're working with card, it's brilliant to have a restricted palette of colours, as it were. Because you don't have a sophisticated set of materials, you have to be really creative with the marks that you make. So I've cut a piece, and then what I'll do is I'll kind of work out where it's going to naturally fit. And what I've done is I've kind of overlapped the segments and the strips so that I'm containing space inside this sculpture just because I want to reduce the overall weight. So this is kind of a good way to do it. So it's a crisscross kind of lattice kind of affair with the work. So I'll just kind of adjust the shapes that I'm using so I'm kind of happy with the piece. And then obviously kind of run a bead of glue down the card. Now, a particular challenge with this piece of work is that the glue itself has an inherent weight. And with something that is so finely and kind of delicately balanced, I have to allow for the weight of the glue in this process. So with poses like this, I tend to not use kind of too much in the way of glue. So I try and kind of be as sparing as I can be. The final stage for my work is actually looking at how it might operate in its various dimensions. Because sometimes there are bits that kind of get missed, especially if I'm, say, sat in one position or, say, sat on the floor and I don't realise what somebody might view as a spectator from a different angle. So you can imagine making a piece of sculpture in a small space. It's quite tricky. You can also imagine making a piece of art on one leg is quite tricky, but when you combine the two, you realise that can be kind of a bit challenging. So in terms of kind of sealing the work, I've used a sealant called Pavapol. It's normally used as a fabric stiffener, but it works as a waterproof agent. Because there's nothing worse than, say, spending a long time making something out of cardboard and then somebody comes along with chocolate on their fingers and they kind of touch the work and then, you know, it's quite hard to repair. So the waterproofing agent that I use acts as an extra layer on the card and to some degree kind of stiffens the outside of the cardboard, so makes it kind of more resistant to damage. I think what I'd like to tell people working with this process is that there is an awful lot in the way of trial and error. So it's very different to, say, carving in stone, where, you know, if you might make a mistake, and I make so many mistakes with my work that you would not believe. And it's in those kind of imperfections that you kind of find the personality and the various kind of aspects that make the work individual.
Are you having fun so far?
Yeah, I'm getting there. So, yeah. I think kind of my most favourite part of the building process probably happens somewhere kind of in the middle, because I know roughly at this stage what I'm going to be making, and I also know that I've got something solid in front of me that I can relate to. And at that point, it's normally where the interesting, inspirational or unintentional aspect to the work kind of emerges. I think sometimes that the most complicated part of the process for me is realising the technical challenges of kind of building something on scale. My passion for making things out of cardboard is something that I've kind of sustained for a long time. I wouldn't know how to make it from any other material, and I think I shouldn't need to, really. I've always hoped with my work that people will see that you can make art from any material. So if anything, I would like to kind of think that I can inspire as many people as possible to be able to make artwork. I hope with the cardboard that it makes people believe that anything is possible.